Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. In this 10-minute moan, the topic, it's not really a moan, it's more of, I would say, an educational broadcast, okay? And what I'm going to discuss is why I believe nationalists should be at least considering tactically voting. Because my belief is, not only have the SNP ruined Scotland for the Unionists, I also believe that they have ruined the independence dreams of nationalists. And the only nationalists that are still buying into the SNP's version of independence and how they're going to achieve it, more importantly, are dwindling daily and are only going to remain the most cultish of their cult members, because their plan, their route to independence is massively flawed. They are taking you for a ride. They will not deliver you independence. If you don't believe me, there are plenty of nationalists, who are still nationalists, by the way, who now see through them and have stopped supporting them and have stopped voting for them. Some, a smaller percentage, are now ex-nationalists because they are so scunnered, that good Scottish word, scunnered, by the failure of the SNP in 17 years to deliver what they've promised, and that is independence. Now, the reason I can say they have no route to even get your referendum, never mind independence, is their plan is highly flawed and incredibly going to fail. Because let me remind you, Nicola Sturgeon's last route to independence was when she failed at the highest court in the land to just demand what she wanted. She declared that the next Westminster election was going to be a de facto referendum. But Nicola Sturgeon stood in the streets of London as soon as she came out of the court and said that the Scottish people deliver more than 50% of their votes, so 50% plus one vote, and for independence parties in the next election, next Westminster election, that would give her, the SNP, the Scottish Government, a mandate to be independent. That was her plan. If you don't believe me, just Google it. Put her name in, de facto, stick it into Google, and watch her speech from about 2 years ago. Now, that was pretty cute, because she didn't say vote SNP, she said a vote for independence parties. So at that time, that included Greens and would go on to also include Alba. Then she got hunted, or left, because she'd had enough. She just got fed up one day and decided, I don't want to be the First Minister of Scotland anymore, if you believe that version of events. So she left. Humza Yousaf got voted in a three-way competition to become the First Minister. Well, that's not true. To become the leader of the SNP. Then it was put to Parliament. He became the First Minister. At their conference last year, the SNP conference last year, Humza declared that his route to independence, because he'd obviously looked at the figures and thought 50% of the vote, probably no be getting that, seeing as we've never got that. So he changed it. And he changed it to the majority of the seats at the next Westminster general election. SNP seats. So he's now cut off the vote for Greens or for Alba. His route to independence was to get 30 seats. He would then go to Westminster and say, that gives me a mandate to hold a referendum. Okay, there's a two-step process for Humza. Now, let's just consider that a minute. To get 29, 30 seats, which would give you half the seats, you could do that with somewhere between 30 and 40% of the vote, depending on how all the votes were cast, right? So it's not an exact science. Now, so what Humza was expecting to do was to get that, let's say he gets 30 seats, right? Go to Westminster and say, look, we've got 30 seats at Westminster, we demand a referendum and you have to give us one because that proves we've got a mandate. At which point Westminster would say, we've just had a look at the figures, Humza, you get 35% of the vote. Please explain to us how you consider that to be a mandate. Right? A mandate, you would be like half or more. That would probably be a better way of doing it. So Hums's plan, although it was easier to achieve, was completely ridiculous in its expectations. Who in the right mind would look at the amount of votes cast in somebody that won 30 seats? Now, don't get me wrong, if they won all the seats and it was 50, 60% of the vote, that would be a different proposition. But that's not what he claimed. What he claimed was, half the seats, that's us we're in. Completely idiotic. Completely idiotic. Then it took us 1 week, one full week, of campaigning for this election, you know, the one that comes in, Nicola Sturgeon promised their versions of the route to independence. It took a whole week before John Swinney said anything. And I found this incredible. I don't understand why no journalist, in fact, he'd been round loads in the first few days, never mind the first week, none of them asked him, what is your route to independence? You are an independence party, you always demand and declare that there's, you know, the will of the Scottish people, all that sort of terminology. It took him about a full week. And then yesterday or the day before, I think it was probably Friday, he eventually said that if they get 30 seats, that would give him the mandate to negotiate a referendum with Westminster. So his plan is the same idiotic plan as Hums's, but at least we've got somewhere now. We can see the route to independence from John Swinney and the updated version of the route to independence by the SNP. Highly flawed. Almost impossible. If you look at the polls, some suggesting single digits seats, which I find hard to. I would love it to be so, but I don't think it's probable. But I think it's completely impossible for them to get 30 plus seats. So John Swinney's plan is not only ridiculous, it's unachievable. So if you're a nationalist, if I was a nationalist, I'd be sitting in my house thinking, these guys have bust it. It's not achieved. There's no plan B. Plan B, they'll make up in the house and they'll do something else and demand because, I don't know, something stupid like the sun rised and set in the same day. That's a mandate for independence, because some of the ideas they have for independence is just ridiculous. And this one is just completely ridiculous. I thought John Swinney was going to read the room, see how the political thing was going to pan out in the polling, etc., for the general election, and match a plan, a route to independence or a referendum to the current situation. He's got nowhere near that. He's just regurgitated just idiotic plan. So as it stands right now, nationalists in Scotland have no route and no plan in front of them that is either achievable or even sensible. They have nothing. So that is why every day I hear more and more nationalists either turning off from the SNP as a minimum or even turning their back on the notion of nationalism, having independence. I actually feel quite sad about that, because some of you might not believe what I'm about to say. But I was in one of these X spaces, which is a new phenomenon for me. They're fantastic. I really enjoy them. I'm becoming almost addicted to them. And I was in one the other night with a guy who's very politically minded, and the vast majority of his political opinions match mine. But we were discussing my notion of the SNP being wiped out of Westminster and Holyrood going forward, and I would hope that the SNP are completely bankrupt. I genuinely believe that, and I've done several videos on that topic. That if they lose heavily in both elections, the income they have won't sustain their business model, so they'll be insolvent. And this chap was saying, yeah, it'd be great, and just end the notion of nationalism forever in Scotland. And I was like, I'm not comfortable with that. I must admit, I'm generally not comfortable with that. I feel quite a democratic type of guy, and I demand my opinion, excuse me, as a unionist, to be allowed in Scotland. So even the demise of the SNP, I wouldn't advocate for 1 minute that the notion of nationalism should die and should be banished. That's very East Germany, communist, Soviet Union type thinking for me. I'm quite happy for people to have their opinion when it opposes mine. I see when people try to kill my opinion, I don't think that acceptable. So by default, I've got to accept other people's opinion. I think that's logical. I think that's a common sense approach. So I'm not advocating for the death of nationalism. I'll tell you what I don't like. I don't mind nationalists. I despise the way nationalism has been portrayed and pushed in Scotland, particularly over the last 17 years. It has become so divisive. Absolutely divisive. It's been terrible. I do have some respect for some nationalists, MPs and MSPs. I'll give you a great example, and I'll not name them because it was not done in a private surrounding, it was done in a semi-public, in a space last night. I was on a space with an independent loving politician, and I was in the space, I wasn't talking, my wee name was shown and he name checked me, and he said, there's Craig Houston in the room, just to let you know, I do watch a lot of what Craig's saying. I don't believe in his politics, but I do watch a lot of his videos, and I listen to what he's saying. That doesn't mean he endorses me. That doesn't mean he agrees with me. That also doesn't mean he has to disagree with me at all times. And that's a nationalist politician. That to me is encouraging. This is a man who, on the big questions, I totally disagree with him. But on a lot of when I sat, and the reason I went on is that I like him. He watching my channel because he likes to hear opposition and opposing opinions, and probably get his finger in the pulse and how people are thinking in the street. And that's why I went on and listened to his space, because I seen a guy and I thought, I don't disagree with everything you say. I disagree in the big ticket things like independence, obviously, but a lot of his sort of how society should operate, I tend to, found myself agreeing with a lot of it, and seems like a nice enough guy, and I know people that know him personally that speak highly of him, and that's a nationalist. I don't want that guy not to have his opinion. What I don't want is any more of this nonsense that we get off the SNP and their version of nationalism, which is you will accept it. Yeah? You will abide. I don't associate myself with that way of thinking, even in the total opposite manner. I don't believe that nationalism should be driven, and I hope the topic as a political discussion never wins. But that doesn't necessarily mean I want the notion of nationalism to die. But the way it's been dealt with over the last 17 years has been horrific. It's seen as polarised as a community, and it's horrific. What I want and I advocate is a place called Holyrood to have 129 people in it who want to do their best for Scotland. And yes, if they want to debate now and again the notion of independence, fine. But when it becomes the single issue and we want to blame everybody else for our own inabilities to manage a country, that has to stop. And I don't like the notion of party politics either. So if we had a Holyrood that was, possibly a minority government or a coalition, or, and a good selection of parties going forward, I'm all for that. As long as these people can debate in a decent manner and come to a democratic opinion, then we take that forward as laws and policies, etc. That's where I would like Holyrood. If Holyrood has to exist, that's another question. And my opinion on that is it's there just now, so we may as well have it operating to its best of its ability, which it's not for 17 years. But back to point, if I was a nationalist and not a dyed-in-the-wool cultish SNP can never do any wrong nationalist, if I was a normal nationalist, a person that got a brain, a person who can think for themselves, I would be deeply upset with what the SNP's done for me over the last 17 years. And the fact that where we are now, they have no route to give the nationalists what they want, and that is independence. They've not even got a route to a referendum now. So that's why if I was a nationalist, I would be tactically voting. Get rid of them and let's start again. If a nationalist wants to tactically vote, there is two options open to them. They can follow the let's get rid of the SNP route, which is dead simple. You go onto Scotland and Union website, and they've got a tactical voting ready reckoner. You put your postcode in, and it tells you how to vote. That is tacticalvotescotland.uk. I'll put the link to it in the bottom. Now, what you do there is that will show you in your constituency who the most likely party is to defeat the SNP. You vote for them, helps keep them out. Now, that might be a bit tough for a lot of nationalists, and that'll only be tough because they've believed a lie. Particularly over the last 10 years, we've heard this unionist parties and independence parties, nationalist parties. There is only one unionist party in the whole of the United Kingdom, and that's in their title, Conservative and Unionist Party. That's it. Labour are not a unionist party. Yes, Labour suggested people vote no in a referendum, but they're just a party that could change their mind in 10 years. Right? They're not a, by default, unionist party. They're a party that looked and went, I think we should vote in this direction on this topic. That's not in their constitution. But the SNP have had us to believe that for most of the time, if you were a nationalist, there's only one option for you. And see those ones over there, you can only vote for them if you're a unionist. And if you vote for any of them, that's a vote for the union. That's untrue. That's a play on words. That's putting SNP goggles on. So, but I understand that a lot of people who are nationalists would feel that way because they were programmed to feel that way with SNP. Don't feel bad about it. The programming worked for hundreds of thousands, right? But you might still struggle to vote for Labour, Tory, or really struggle to vote for Tory, or Liberal Democrat, or any of the other options. I totally get that. But if you're not fooled by that notion driven by the SNP that all those guys over there are baddies, then vote for an independence party. You can vote for two. There's Greens and there's Alba. Now, the Greens, I think anybody that votes for the Greens is howling at the moon as much as the Green Party. And if I was a nationalist, I'd probably vote for Alba. If I was a nationalist, I'd probably be strung between two options. Vote for the traditional party that is, maybe dethrone them or keep a seat away from them, or lend my vote to Alba, who I think common sense and logic would tell me, although I'm not going to advocate any, I don't think I'll ever be a member of any of the nationalist parties, I think have proven to be far more sensible than the other option, the continuity option, as they would love you to vote for. So that's why I believe that nationalists should be tactically voting as much as unionists, because the SNP have let you down, probably let nationalists down more than they've let me down, because they sold you a dream and have failed for 17 years to deliver on it. And they do not have a plan, a route even to a referendum that is either logical or achievable. But they have to say it or nobody would vote for them. So they've just flung it in. It's never going to happen. And even if it did happen, they got to 30 seats. They went to Westminster. Westminster go, but you've done that with 32% of the vote. Please explain where this mandate is. It is non-logical, right? So if I was a nationalist, I would have to vote for somebody else other than the SNP, because it's the old adage, a good sign of insanity is doing exactly the same today what you done yesterday and expect a different result tomorrow. If you enjoyed the podcast, give us a thumbs up. If you've not already done so, please consider subscribing. But as long as you're not the SNP or any other mad remaining cult, everybody else, have a great day. Cheery bye now.